We will now be giving over a synopsis of the Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Shoftim, Zayin Elul, of the year Heitinase, 5751. This Sicha is perhaps known as a very famous Sicha, a historic Sicha, as you will soon understand why. In this Sicha, the Rebbe MHM Shlita starts off quoting the verse at the beginning of the Parsha, which is the mitzvah of Shoftim v'Shoitrim titen lecha b'chol sharecha. There's a mitzvah to appoint judges and officers in all of your cities. And then we have the contrast to that is a pasuk in the Navi, which we read in the Haftarah a few weeks ago. And based on that verse in the Navi, Yeshaya chapter 1, is actually our tefillah that we say 3 times a day on the regular weekdays. And the pasuk says, "Ve'ashiva shoftayich kivarishena, v'yayatzayich kivatchila." And I'm going to restore your judges as at first, and your yoyatzim, your advisors or your mentors, as in the beginning. So the questions over here, a few obvious questions. Why in the Parsha does it speak about Shoftim and Shoitrim? And in the Nevuah, in the prophecy about the times of Moshiach, it drops the Shoitrim, doesn't have them mentioned. And it does have Yoyatzim, which are not at all mentioned in Chumash. It has the idea of Yoyatz, of the advisor or the counselor. Why is that? And also, another question, in the Parashas it says Shoftim v'Shoitrim in the simple word, without making it possessive. It just says judges and officers. Whereas in the Navi, it says Shoftayich and Yoyatzayich, possessive in second person. Your judges and your mentors. Why the difference? With a few other questions. But basically in this Sicha, the Rebbe MHM Shlita explains the difference between the function of a shofet, of a judge, and that of a yoyetz, of an advisor or a mentor. And the purpose of Shoitrim. Basically, Shoitrim we won't have to have in the times of Moshiach, because the Shoiter is merely the individual, those people which carry the stick or the whip, and they force the people to adhere to the instructions and the directives, to the verdict of the Shofet, of the judge. Now in a time when everybody is doing what they need to do, and there is no evil, and no one has a Yetzer Hara, so therefore there won't be any need for Shoitrim. Therefore, the prophecy about Moshiach drops Shoitrim, no need for Shoitrim basically. Instead, what we will have is Yoyatzim. What is the difference between a Shofet and a Yoyetz? A Shofet basically is a judge who gives the verdict from above. And he's remote from the individual, from the recipient, and it's a very high, intense level because he is actually transmitting the word of Hashem in its pure form. He is giving the verdict. When there are 2 litigants that have a dispute and the judge rules according to the ruling of the Torah, he's saying this man is obligated to pay this man is exempt, whatever the case may be. The focus there is therefore more so on the judge than on the recipient. And it's an arousal from above, going along with the theme of milamayla lamata, as opposed to milamata lamayla, the 2 types of approaches that we have. And it represents an unlimited flow from Hashem. Those are all of the positive qualities of the Shofet. But that carries with it a downside as well. And that we're going to see when we speak about the positive qualities of the Yoyetz. So the advantage of the Yoyetz is that he is closer to the individual that is being judged or that he's speaking to. He's giving him advice which that person can relate to and personally understands that it's for his own benefit. He internalizes that which the Yoyetz is telling him, as opposed to the Shofet, where he may just do it with Kabbalas oil, with accepting the yoke of heaven, because so said Hashem, and this is what the judge decreed is the will of Hashem, and that's it. He has no choice. He may not like it. Whereas the Yoyetz is explaining it to him in a way where he can appreciate it. And therefore the focus is more on the recipient than on the Yoyetz. And that represents the idea of an arousal from below. However, it's a limited flow from Hashem. So the Shofet has an advantage over the Yoyetz, and the Yoyetz, of course, has an advantage over the Shofet. So ultimately, we need both. The Rebbe MHM Shlita goes on and explains that this, in fact, is the mitzvah of obeying and adhering to Rabbanon in general, but particularly, and he constantly is focusing on, besides the fact that you have Rabbanim who are giving you halachic ruling, and we have the directive of the Mishnah, Asei L'charav, that every individual is required to appoint for themselves an individual to be their mentor or their advisor when it comes to serving Hashem. But above that, and in addition to that, a main point is that we have the shofet of the generation and the yoyetz of the generation. And he says in absolutely clear terms that this is himself, basically. He says it is the Rabbeim of each generation, and he says it is my father-in-law, the Rebbe generation, who is in fact the shofet and the yoyetz of our generation. Then he goes on in the next part of the Sicha, and he explains, in order to understand better, have a better understanding of the difference between shofet and yoyetz, so he brings in the concept of Torah and Navi, which again appears in this week's Parsha, the mitzvah of having a prophet and listening to the prophet, we find in this week's Parsha as well. It's Parshas Shoftim. Here there's a tremendous, there's a great length of explanation, quoting from the Rambam, and the Rebbe MHM Shlita is very elaborately explaining what the Rambam says when it comes to the mitzvah of shofet and all the various different principles that we need to learn from this and the lessons that we need to know. Just a couple. One thing is, we have to know that there can be a Navi in any given generation, and that's why the Rambam puts it in his halachas and tells us all of these details in a sefer of halachas, because we need to know how to identify a Navi. And once you have a halacha, one of the halachas is that once a certain individual has been established as a Navi of Hashem, and you're not permitted to doubt him, and you must obey everything that he says from that point on, if that person points to another individual and testifies that that other person is a Navi, that second individual needs to do nothing and does not need to prove his credentials at all. He is to be accepted as an absolute Navi, because in fact the first Navi said that he is. And the Rebbe Moshiach explains this very clearly, that this is referring to our Rabbeim. He brings down the Rambam from Igeres Teiman, where the Rambam in Igeres Teiman explains that prophecy will come back before the coming of Moshiach. The Jewish people will have prophecy. So you have Nevuah, and you have on the other hand Torah. Torah is from above, just like the shofet, and Torah is the word of Hashem, whether you like it or not, whether you appreciate it or not, whether you internalized it or not, whether you feel like it or not. This is the word of Hashem. You must obey with Kabbalah Soil. That's Torah. On the other hand, Navi means that the revelation of godliness within this physical world according to the limitations of this world, and that's why it specifically came into the mind, into the heart, and primarily into the mouth of the Navi, of the prophet, who is a human being who speaks the word that Hashem puts in his mouth. That is a Navi. So the Navi would be compared to the yoyetz, because it's something which we can appreciate and that we can relate to, and it came down to our level. It isn't just thrown upon us from above down, but rather we can internalize it. So we have the concept of shofet, we have the concept of yoyetz, and now we're introduced also to the individual who is the Navi, the prophet. And again, the Rebbe MHM Shlita says very clearly that the Nevuah came back, and we had Nevuah throughout the generations, and he deals with the idea of what the Gemara says, that from the time of the death of the last Nevi'im of Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, so Nistalka, Ruach HaKodesh from the Jewish people, and he explains that that just means that the era of prophecy has stopped, and common prophecy has stopped, but it doesn't mean that you don't have individuals that are prophets. We have throughout history, way after Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, many people that were Nevi'im. And beginning with Arizal revealing the innermost dimensions of the Torah, Kabbalah, and then primarily with the Baal Shem Tov and Rabbeinu Nisiyenu. And the Rebbe MHM Shlita brings down over here that Rabbeinu Nisiyenu were prophets. And he says very clearly, especially regarding his father-in-law and the continuation through the succession, through his students, etc., making a clear reference to himself. And he says over here that whatever the words of the Navi are, we are to adhere to. And everything that he tells us, so certain things are said to us in the way of a shofet, certain things in the way of a yoyetz, and certain things are proclaimed as an outright prophecy. And here the Rebbe MHM Shlita says the famous words, that up until the primary nevuah, the main prophecy, and that is that la'alter legeula, that immediately we're going to the redemption, and Tekef umiyad mamish, literally immediately, hinei zeh Moshiach ba, behold, Moshiach is coming. And then he says we have a responsibility to adhere to the shofet, to the yoyetz of our generation. And then he translates it into each individual within ourselves. Each person has the shofet, the yoyetz within himself. And that would be to obey your godly soul, which is the moichin, the intellect, the chachma bina v'das, and so forth, and how that translates in the person. And you are to place the shoftim in all your gates, the 7 gates, which is the 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the 2 nostrils, and the mouth, and each one of them is 2, because you have the positive and the negative, all the things that you do, that you are supposed to do, asay toiv, and all things you're not supposed to do, sur meirah, and then the mouth also, even though it's 1 mouth, it has 2, which is the idea of different types of tastes, sweet and bitter. And to transform that, he explains all of this. So in each home, you have the husband and the wife, which would be the shofet and the yoyetz. And we are to publicize this to kol anshe hador, to all the people of the generation, that we have in fact merited, that Hashem has chosen an individual who on his own right is incomparably higher and greater than everyone else in the generation. And this individual is a Baal Bechira. He's an individual that has freedom of choice. And Hashem has chosen him and appointed him to be the Navi of the generation. And we now have the mitzvah of Elav Tishma'un, as it says in this parasha, that you are to obey everything he says. And as the Rambam gives the details, that we must listen to whatever he says, and we're not allowed to doubt him or to second guess him. In this Sicha, there are in fact many hints, aside for those explicit things where the Rebbe MHM Shlita seems to be alluding to all sorts of things regarding himself as being the Navi of the generation, that now recently the custom is that it's verbalized, and he speaks all about that. Also, there's a footnote 116, which is very important to highlight, where he says that this is the nevuah, the prophecy, that Moshiach is coming immediately. So he points out that he's not saying this merely as a chacham v'shofet, as a sage and a judge, but rather as a Navi. And he says, because this is bivados, this is with absolute certainty. And he tells us to look in the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe and gives us a reference. Over there, the Alter Rebbe explains the difference between prophecy and between Torah. It's possible for an individual to see something, and they truly see a certain vision of that's what's happening above, and it may not materialize in the literal sense in this physical world, because there are all sorts of obstacles as you go from world to world. There's so many levels till you finally come down here. However, once the Navi, the human being, that prophet, verbalized the word of Hashem, then it's absolute, there's no turning back, and it will in fact be fulfilled literally within this physical world. So therefore there's no backing out. The Rebbe MHM also says, he points out that we believe the words of the Navi, not because they're his own personal words, but rather because they are the words of Hashem said to this Navi. And he emphasizes and highlights those words. Ebershton's, Hashem's words, and to this Navi. Which I think, as we will explain in the Shir at more length, I think that the Rebbe MHM Shlita is coming to say that we have to accept these words, not only because he's repeating words of Rabbeinu Nisiyin which preceded him, which is what the Rebbe MHM Shlita usually says by Fabrengen, that he's saying over words of Rabbeinu Nisiyenu. However, in this case, when he's telling us this nevuah of the redemption, in addition to what the Rebbe Rayat said, here we have to believe it because these are the words of our Navi, of our generation, that he's saying them. Then he goes on and explains the concept of the Eben HaShesiyah. He compares the existence of the Shofet and the Navi of the generation, that he exists eternally, to the Eben HaShesiyah, the foundation stone, which is found in this world, in the place where the Kodesh HaKadoshim was. On the Temple Mount in Yerushalayim, there is a place where the Beis HaMikdash belongs. So over there is a foundation stone, upon which the first Beis HaMikdash in the beginning had the Aron, had the Holy Ark. However, afterwards it was hidden away, and throughout the entire second Beis HaMikdash there was no Aron there was just that stone. That stone, says the Rebbe MHM Shlita, is still there, is always there, and has no changes at all, not even the shinui of Gniza. It's not even hidden away, it's not even, if you will, buried away. So he's telling us about the Shofet and the Navi, that he exists nitzchi, he's eternal, referring to himself again, as a very specific individual in a specific place, and he's not buried. I think you understand the point. And he makes a very strong point about the leader of the generation being everything, as Anasi hu hakoil. So he says that we have to publicize to everybody that we have to adhere to the directives of Man Malkei Rabbanan, of the rabbis in general, and especially the Vashayfet and the Yates of our generation, which is the Nasi of the generation, and he is the entire generation. And by our connection and attachment and our devotion and adhering to all of the directives of the Shayfet, the Yates, the Navi of our generation, which is the Rebbe MHM Moshiach, that itself brings about the godly revelation to the entire world, because that's the point. We need to reveal the essence of Hashem in the entire world, and the way to do that is by connecting to that one individual who brings out all of that.